Hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborgian Life Live. Today we're going to be talking about goodness, truth, and spiritual, not experiences, but appearance. We're going to give some like spiritual beauty tips, actually. If you're looking for those, my name is Curtis Childs. I'm the host of Swedenborgian Life, which is this show, and this is Dr. Jonathan Rose. Well, we got Curtis. You as series editor, New Century Edition. Congratulations. Thank you. We're going to do a couple of things here in this show. We're kicking off a brand new year, and we want to get a fresh start with our engagement with Swedenborg. We want to provide you guys with some foundational stuff as well as some way far out there stuff. Hopefully give you everything in between, a little audience interaction. We actually got a whole bevy of stuff we want to throw at you tonight, and it looks like this. First of all, we're going to do an icebreaker, and you'll see what that is. It is what it sounds like. We've got our weekly Swedenborg keywords, our spiritual world road trip, the chat Q&A, the guest story.
Oh yeah,
and then the ice melter, which is the return to the icebreaker there. And don't worry, I'm going to host you all the way through it, so you don't get lost. To start with the icebreaker, what this is a chance for. We're in a social situation here. Like you and I are sitting here.
Here we are.
We got it, but also there's all of you out there watching live and even watching afterwards, right? Because you're still going to be going through the same processes with the content. How do we break the ice? This is what you're always looking to, and it's usually with a question. And since this is a Swedenborgy show, we're going to do a Swedenborg question, so let's get to it, our very first segment now. Man, that's satisfying. That shot of just like the way that pick
Icebreaker. It's good, huh?
It's great, man. So here it is. This is not a corporate retreat. This is not like an after-school activity. So our icebreaker question is going to be, you guessed it, Swedenborg related. And here it is right here. What is an idea in Swedenborg's works that has had a positive impact in your life? Now, here's how the icebreaker section works. We're going to answer this question, and we want you in the chat to answer this question as well, because at the end, we're going to be getting to your answers to this very question. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be asking other questions. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the whole show. We'll have a Q&A section dealing with those. But for now, please get your responses in. And there better be responses to this one. Because if nobody has an answer to this, then why are we doing this?
That's right.
Why put these ideas out there if they ain't doing anything for no one? There has to be some kind of positive effect, or else we got to find a new line of work.
Yeah, that's right.
So can you help us out here? You've been in Swedenborg's works a decent amount here, translating, reading.
That's right.
You ever find anything that was helpful?
I found one or two things over the years.
Just give me, I know it's hard to narrow it down.
It is hard to narrow it down. But an idea in Swedenborg's works that's had a positive impact on me is that idea of an inner and an outer self, and that they're separate, so that there's more than one of me, kind of thing. There are different layers.
I want to stop you, because you could. How could that ever help you? So I'm interested in some weird abstract thing. So what does that do for you?
What one thing is just the ability to look down on the lower self, not in a negative sense, but just being able to observe. So the idea that if there's a part, and other religious traditions have this too, but if there's a part where you can look at another part, this part is not the part that's looking. So there's a higher part that can watch. Yeah. So I notice when people are speaking, sometimes they'll say something, and then they say, "Listen to me, I sound like," or something.
Yeah.
Well,
I sound like my mother.
Yeah, right. There's some loop that's watching the thing that you just said, and you can comment on it, Yeah. And but what really helped me about it was that if I would get into a bad mood, I would think, "Oh, I'm just a person who is in a bad mood, I'm a horrible person," or something, and then I'd be in some transcendent, uplifted state or something, and I would think, "Oh, and am I this kind of like it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how I can be in these different states."
Yeah.
But realizing they're different parts was very helpful. That I'm in the basement now. This is an upstairs. There are different levels to this thing, so it really helped me understand my process a little more, and what other people go through as well.
So it's not which one am I? Am I cool or am I not cool?
Right. That's right.
No, you're both.
You're both. That's right.
Well, I get it. And we're here.
How about
you? I just one more thought on that.
Yeah.
We're here trying to host a show about spirituality, and we're meant to like talk like we know all this stuff about it. And there's times when I'm like pretty spiritual guy, and there's other times when I'm like, why did this stupid thing happen?
Right.
Like, wait, which one am I? But it's cool to think like, no, everyone's got their lower self, which is just as obnoxious as
as anybody else's. Yeah, that's right.
And then you got your higher self, which shows up inconsistently, but it's awesome when it does. I've been digging, so thanks for sharing that. I've been really digging divine providence. And this is a key. If you haven't heard of divine providence, this is the operation of the divine to guide events to the best possible end. I mean, that's one way that I would put it. And Swedenborg says this is present in everything, the way I'm moving my hands right now.
Every detail.
Somehow, God is trying to lead everything to the best possible conclusion through that. But I've specifically been thinking about that in regards to when I am bumping up against people and I feel like they want something, but I want something different, or why did this thing not happen now? The idea that behind it all, there's God sort of playing chess, lining things up. When that may not
playing a really long game too, if I might interject that.
I don't know, when I focus on that concept, it just changes the way I feel about my own ambitions.
Yeah.
About other people, just like, okay, wait. There's another force at work here, and I can trust that. Just instantly, I think, takes me a little bit out of my lower self into my higher self.
It's not just the pushing and shoving. There's another context in which this is all happening.
That is well said. And so for me, that's been huge. And hopefully,
that's a good one.
You guys have had concepts that have really impacted you as well, and we'll get to them, as we said, during the Ice Melter. Or Icebreaker. Ice Melter at the end of the show. Right. That's going to be great. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're all friends now. We're relatively socially comfortable with each other. Let's get into the hard stuff. We're going to do a little bit of Swedenborg keywording. You could even call this Swedenborg dictionary. That we're going to basically reappear and then define some terms for you, some Swedenborgianese. We were
very deep for a minute there.
That was that was our inner self for a second there. Now you guys can see our outer self.
Yeah.
But we're gonna take a couple words that pop up in Swedenborg, and you might be asking, why are we doing this section? Why would you ever need to do that? Isn't that boring? It's not boring, right?
Yeah,
it's not boring, and it's essential because Swedenborg will use these different terms over and over again, and he'll use them in a different way than you're expecting him to use them.
That's right.
You can't get too far into Swedenborg without understanding his sort of building blocks that he makes things out of. And I don't know if you'll see any building blocks used more often than these two we have today, which are good and truth. You try to crack open Swedenborg anywhere, you're going to hit some variation on good and truth, and it's all over. And we
started in the deep end here, I would have to say, with these key words.
Isn't that funny? Because you'd think good and truth for a strapping theologian like yourself, that's nothing. It's the most basic thing in Swedenborg, but it's way more complex than you think, and way more important than you might think. And this is to prove it to you. Here's a quote from New Jerusalem 11, showing why we need to really understand this stuff. He says, all things in the universe that are in accord with the divine design go back to goodness and truth.
Yeah, that makes it a key words, right? Like, the quote doesn't explain what they are
we
right there.
We have no idea what they are.
But it says that they're massive. They're like yin and yang or something. Like everything in the universe is according to those two different things. Yeah. Everything that's within order or within the divine design.
Yes, at least you could venture that it's worth doing a 5-minute internet show segment about goodness and truth, or 10 minutes or whatever.
5, 6.
So let's go a little bit farther into trying to unearth. Okay, so they're so important. Everything goes back to them, but what do they mean? This is new Divine Love and Wisdom 409. What is good is a matter of love, and what is true is a matter of discernment or thinking or puzzling.
Yeah, that's right.
There is the same kind of union in everything the Lord has created in the universe.
So that's, again, pretty sweeping, that everything the Lord has created in the universe.
We're baby stepping into intelligibility here, or into concreteness.
Yeah.
Their function looks to what is good, and the form of their function looks to what is true. So we're getting some data, but it's still hard to think of what would that mean concrete.
It's a bit of a head scratcher there, isn't it? Because you get terms like love. Okay, so good has something to do with love. And then truth has something to do with our intellect or discernment and so on.
Yeah.
And also has something to do with good as like substance and truth is like form. But we need something a little more concrete. Do you have any better passage than that?
Well, because you can read it all the time and still feel like you're sort of circling. Wait, what does he mean? What does he mean? But this stuff is the most important stuff in the world. But what am I doing? Well, it just so happens that Karan, who is one of the writers for this show, found deep in Swedenborg's Journal of Spiritual Experiences what I think is the best description of goodness and truth that he ever gives. So without further ado, let's go to Spiritual Experiences 3427. He titles it, What Good, the Truth of Good, which is this sort of hybrid thing we're going to look at, and Truth are.
And check out the colors. I love it.
I know.
So you got good is red, truth is blue, and then truth of good is purple because they're blue and red together.
Stuart must have known color theory.
That's amazing. Okay.
So here's how he breaks it down. Take fruit. So do you think you could apply goodness and truth to fruit? Swedenborg says you can.
Wow. Huh. That's pretty concrete.
Fruit, for example. Whatever use the fruit serves is good. How it is put to the use is the truth of good. The quality of the fruit's taste, smell, and beauty is truth.
Now, do you have a piece of fruit
somewhere? Let's break it down line by line. I always have something.
Oh, okay, good.
Around. So
okay, what is that? Is that an orange or something?
Nah, it's a grapefruit.
That's a grapefruit?
And you can tell just based on some of its qualities. Or that's what I was told. I haven't eaten it. But
okay.
Let's go line by line. So what could this possibly mean?
Let's have a
look. In this, there is this, everything goes back to goodness and truth, including this
even
thing.
in whatever that thing is.
That grew on a tree. So whatever use the fruit serves is good. And Swedenborg generally assigns, when he talks about use, he's talking about use to human beings. Eventually it comes back to conscious beings.
That's right. It's just something that is like good for food and so on, that kind of thing, right?
So you'd think, okay, let's say a fruit like this is a citrus fruit. The use it's nourishing. It's got a lot of vitamins in it.
Yeah.
It increases your health and makes you happy.
Has good fiber in there and everything. That's right.
So that's the use. That's the good.
So the good part.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, what are the other things going to be?
So when you're thinking about what's the good in a grapefruit, it's the thing that it does to help. Then how it is put to use is the truth of good. Okay. How is this put to use? The eating.
Right. So the truth of good. All right.
So eating
I'm going to have to think about that a little more. But the how it's put to the use. So like the truth of good, which is a complicated phrase.
This is the old translation.
The old translation.
Translated it this way.
NCE, the New Century Edition, people would probably say something like the truth that arises from goodness or is connected with goodness or something like that.
You guys would.
It's interesting that so there's truth would be some information about, hey, if you saw someone just peeling it and then eating the peel, you'd say, no, it's actually, you take the segments in there, so that would be the truth of good, like how you get that use out of it.
Yeah. And
or if you want to make a juice or whatever.
Even within the body, I would imagine the way your body interacts with the fruit, the digestive process,
breaks it down,
how it's taken, because to get all the way to creating health, it's got to go through, you got to separate out all this stuff. So that would be the truth of good. Then the quality of the fruit's taste, smell, and beauty is truth. So the color,
right.
What it smells like, what it tastes like,
smell.
That's the truth. That's the manifestation of it. So this is what he means.
So that's like the form. When you're talking about substance and form.
Yes.
So the quality of it. And so one thing would be, well, is that a grapefruit or is that an orange? That would be the truth of it. But also within grapefruits, there are some really good ones, sweet ones. Some have a lot of pith or, thick skins or whatever. And
look at how this thing is, like this one's got some little wrinkles on the top here and these pores. That's part of the truth of it. I mean, that is
that's
the rendering
form that it takes.
That's right. It doesn't the good it does and the form it takes are the two sides of the same thing. But that is goodness and truth.
So it's easier for me to get a hold of the good part and the truth part. But the truth of good, where the two are linked together, that's a little trickier. But I see what it's saying there. How it's put to the use is the truth of good.
So, and Swedenborg said, remember, that goodness and truth, everything in the universe goes back to it. So you're finding this combination of this relationship between truth and goodness, not just in the fruit, but in every aspect of the fruit. It's like a holographic sort of thing. Because Swedenborg says that you can even break it down into just the smell
Is this the same passage?
This is the same passage just after that. So you could do that same pattern just on the smell of the fruit. So whatever use the odor serves, such as to the brain, the lung, the heart, is good.
Wow. And it's odd to pick the odor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, that's an interesting choice.
That's right.
Rather than the taste or something else of it.
Yeah.
But okay.
But you think about aromatherapy, there's probably some benefits from smelling this thing.
Essential oils and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
So
it makes you feel good when you smell it, for sure.
Yeah, and then how it is made to serve the use. He gets really specific here. By the nostrils, the temple, or the region around the head like a wreath, he's talking about a part of the brain there, is the truth of good. So
again, it's how it is used, how it's put to use is the truth of good part.
Yes.
And so the use is so that thing is sitting there waiting to do a job, right?
Yeah.
It's waiting to do something useful. And how that happens is the truth of the good. And then what's that last bit there?
What kind of odor and such characteristics are truth? So that would be
so that's exact.
What's that called? Koilia? Like that experience that you can't really describe, but it's just the experience of something. The feeling what you get when you smell. That experience.
That's the truth. That embodies that. Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Very interesting.
So here we are applying this to something cool, but really relatively superficial and
amazing
relatively
that you can
concrete.
slice that all the way down to each. So you could say the same thing about the taste. You could say the same thing about the structure of the cells in there and how it holds the juice and everything, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It should be
everything.
Probably every cell
3 in it
has the truth. Yes. And that's because everything in the universe goes back to goodness and truth. But it's not all just stuff outside of us. Because think about things like motivations and things that you think, are those in the universe? Swedenborg says even those have the same structure.
Really?
This is the next part of that quote. Take charity. Now, what's charity? When Swedenborg says charity, what's he mean by that?
Yeah, it's like there are different renderings, caring or goodwill, thoughtfulness, things like that. It's sort of holding someone else, like wishing them well. That's kind of a way of explaining it.
Okay, so take that feeling in you. Whatever use the charity serves is the good. So what you're trying to do when you want to help somebody and the effect on them.
Right.
Excuse me, that's the good.
So the good is the effect of it. It's okay. I did something kind for someone, and then they felt good because I did that.
How the charity is to be dispensed is the truth of good. I mean, that's how you get your resources, whatever they are, to the person.
And isn't it true that when you're trying to do something for someone, I mean, we just came out of the Christmas season where you're thinking about what to get, and then not just what to get somebody, but the presentation, right?
Yep.
Should I wrap it? Should I joke wrap it like extra large? Or, should I write a kindly note with it? Or should I be a little mysterious? So that's the truth of good, is how to do that, and thinking about how to do it most effectively, I assume.
And that's part of the experience, And then what kind of charity is the truth? So that is the particular form your act took.
Right. Because you could feel, you're feeling sympathy for somebody.
Yeah.
You could call them, you could text them, you could get them a card, you could bring over a meal. There's various things you could do, right? And so that would be the truth of it, would be it's taking exactly this form as opposed to that form. But the use would be, I wanted to have that impact, Well,
let's see if we can think of a really good, like a really concrete example of this playing out in charity. Like what would it, like, let's see, what would it be if we were going to take this all the way through an action?
Well, I had an example this weekend, actually.
Oh,
it was super, super cold here in the Northeast this weekend, and a lot of people's cars and batteries died and stuff like that.
That's right.
And I got a call from somebody whose battery had died. So I went over there, and if I reflect on it, I went over there. I wanted to help them get their car going.
Yeah.
So that was kind of on the good side, wouldn't you say? Like it was that desire in my heart. So it has to do with love or helping out or something.
And you're feeling like you have understand sort of some of what their suffering is. You like
sympathize and
empathize. Like
empathize,
I want you to feel better.
Yeah, right. It's horrible to be stranded on such a cold day and all that kind of stuff. So I think I can help out. My car's working, so I want to do that.
Okay.
And then when I went over there, so we're getting ready to jumpstart the car.
Yeah.
But neither the owner of the car or I can figure out how to pop the hood.
I thought you were going to say how to jump the car, because I don't even know how to do that. But
we couldn't figure out how to get at the battery.
Yeah.
And so we're looking around and we're pulling things and things like this. And this is, I think, where that truth of good comes in.
Yeah.
I'll explain that a little more in a bit. But so what I realized was, okay, well, I think it's got to be inside the car, because there was some law in the last 30 or 40 years where you pull that from inside and it releases it a little bit, and then you undo it outside and pull it up. So it's got to be in here. And and this is just from prior knowledge, isn't there a manual somewhere? And sure enough, there's a manual in the glove box, like 500 pages long. Yeah. So how do I work my way through this? So I'm thinking, well, there's an index.
I look it up in the index. It's freezing this whole time.
And it's freezing this whole time. Just looking it up in the index, and I'm moving very quickly and everything, and urgently. And when I finally found the information, it was down on the left, like by your feet on the side. Okay. I hadn't seen that before in other cars, but when I was groping around, I couldn't find it. Pop! Oh, it was so satisfying when I popped it, because I knew, okay, now we're going to be okay. So I was thinking about that, like if you just had the truth, there's all this truth in the manual, but I'm not sitting around sort of putting my feet up and reading the manual. Yeah, I'm only interested in one piece of information in there. Yeah. I'm not interested in how the wipers work or anything else. And there's also truth about what the car, how it works, what it looks like. Like, where is that hood release is somewhere. Someone put it somewhere. There's a truth about that. Right. But the truth of good, I think the way Swedenborg's using it, is that I have a good in mind. I have a use in mind, which is that I want the car to start. Yeah. And there's this thing in the way. So I have a lack of knowledge. I'm lacking some truth that I need to know how to pop the hood. It's just a mundane sort of example. But I think it was interesting because it really motivated me. It was so satisfying when I learned. So when Swedenborg says that's what helps you put it to use, that information is what made it possible to jump the car.
And Swedenborg talks about goodness and truth coming together like a marriage. And they talk about how goodness longs for truth. And I think about that desire in you to help this person is just longing for that information. Like, I just want to know how to pop this hood.
I can't rest. I know. I'm freaking out.
That's them falling in love right there. Right. So that's cool. That's good,
right. Man. And then you get because even if I have something good in my heart, like I want to help them out, if I go over there and that I don't know anything, and so I just say, "Oh, sorry, I don't know how to pop your hood,"
which would have been me,
and then but they would say, "Well, that's no good, right?" Because if the car hasn't started, doesn't matter what's in your heart. My car is still dead.
It's the thought that counts.
So you haven't gotten it all the way to that use that the good wanted.
That's legit. So there we go, guys. You're not going to get from us a better explanation of what goodness and truth are, or at least what we can do in 15 minutes.
That was better than we're really able.
That's right. We just overperformed there. So hopefully that gives you just a sense as you wade into Swedenborg and encounter these words, of what they are. So
that's right. And it's interesting that I think the reason you would say, well, why not just say what you're talking about? Why not say pop the hood or something like that? But Swedenborg says that angels love to think in these abstractions. Mm-hmm. One size fits all. So if you think in these terms, you're lifted up above time and space. So it's all human beings across all time, but one human being's life or one little aspect of one piece of fruit, and the angels love the fact that that's kind of outside of time and space. Yeah. So I think Swedenborg's trying to drag us with these key words into a spiritual way of thinking about things.
Well, and it shows you have a greater understanding of what's going on if you can place broader categories on. Like, you can say, I know that there's a hammer and a saw and a screwdriver and a wrench, but if you can step back and realize these are all tools.
These are all tools.
That means you know something more about
category. That's right.
Category.
That's right. And if this doesn't work, I'll try that. Or something. It gives you a range.
Exactly. So there's your terms, and we appreciate you sitting through doing that hard work. Now for dessert, let's get to some spiritual experience stuff. And really, that's what Swedenborg was always doing, is trying to get people to understand these core things and using his spiritual experience to try to illustrate those. And we're going to do that very same thing in segment 3. That's right. We're going on a road trip. And it really was that his book, Heaven and Hell.
Hello.
Oh, we better talk about these guys first. We're going to be looking at how goodness and truth affect how we appear in the afterlife. How certain conditions can make us look like this, and then certain conditions can make us look friendly and happy and wonderful,
or this gentleman, at least differently looking or something.
Yeah. So yes, Swedenborg would try to tell people about all these principles in like his book Secrets of Heaven, and then they were like, just tell us about you visited heaven and hell. What's going on there?
Tell me about that.
And really, heaven and hell, he wrote it with all these experiences, but always link back to, you put these little annotations in there. See Secrets of Heaven for this. See Secrets of Heaven for this, because he wanted to show through these experiences how the underlying principles worked.
How it works. It's not just a list of experiences.
Yeah,
that's right. There's some point underneath there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
All of his stories are entertaining, but also informative. And this story we're going to look at now is looking at how goodness and truth can have an effect on how we appear in the other life. And there's a couple of characters in this story. And
wait, you're saying this is another goodness and truth thing?
That's right.
Okay,
this
cool.
is another.
Right.
We're still on theme. We didn't leave the theme.
Okay,
show,
good.
Guys.
Cool. That's great. Even though we're on a road trip, we're still on the same theme.
No, man, you take your work with you on the road trip.
Good. Okay, great.
There's two characters in this story that I'd love you to give us a little background on here.
Okay, so I see this is Marius and Birchenius.
So this is Swedenborg saying he met these people in the spiritual world.
In the spiritual world, but who he had known when he was alive. I mean, he was alive the whole time in this world.
Yeah.
But he met them when they were alive in this world. And one was from his childhood. Marius was his childhood tutor. He was a distant relative, like a first cousin once removed or something like that, Johann Marius. And Birchenius was someone from his, a colleague from his career on the Board of Mines, where they were about assessing the metals and supervising. It was a huge part of the Swedish economy.
Okay.
And so Swedenborg was on this Board of Mines, and so was Birchenius. So one was someone he'd worked with very much, like studied under, another one who he'd worked with for decades, a long time. So he knew these people very well.
And so this is the story of when he met them in the spiritual world and got to see not just how they were doing, but how they were looking.
How they looked.
Which is what really matters.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. He says, this is from Spiritual Experiences 4717.
Okay.
I saw two who were good, and whom I had known in the world.
Marius and Birchenius.
Their faces looked entirely different than before, and I was asked whether I recognized them.
Oh, their faces changed? So they didn't look like Marius and Birchenius?
You know how maybe it's a dream when you're like, okay, you were there, but you didn't look like you.
Maybe you didn't look like yourself. Yeah, that's right.
But you could tell it was them, but they not because they looked exactly the same.
Right.
I said that I did not, and guessing finally discovered that it was
Birchenius.
It was a handsome, clear human face. He was seen in an open carriage because he was then meditating on the doctrine of charity. So that too was an appearance because of what was going on. The reason for this is that good joined with truth then shapes the face, meaning in the spiritual world, good joined with truth shapes our face. So it's not like here you see what shapes our faces is genetics and environmental
heredity,
factors, right?
And just whether you got hit in the head or whatever, right?
Yeah. And this is something that's coming out of the kind of heart and mind you're cultivating.
That's cool.
So he goes on to say, for every angel and good spirit is the form of his own good given a shape. And we learned what good is.
The form of good. Interesting.
So this harkens back to our truth and good. That you got the purpose of this. The purpose, that kind of health that lies within this is the form of that health.
Takes that form, right.
Right. So similarly, whatever is in the deep desires of us, we become an image of that. Which is different because here you can be very handsome and be very evil. They don't go together.
There's no particular correlation.
He talks about that. He says those who are evil in the spiritual world, however, gradually shed their human form, and as to their faces, when seen in the light of heaven, do not look like human beings, but like monsters, deformed in various ways.
Ooh, that shedding sounds intense. Shedding the human form, forget about it. I'm moving away from that. Now, I'm interested that it says, when seen in the light of heaven. That's pretty important. Because Swedenborg does explain in other passages that there's what you might call, for lack of a better word, the light of hell.
Yes.
In which people look fine. It's only when heaven shines in, which it doesn't need to do all the time. But when heaven shines in, then you see, because heaven is the light of truth, like that shows you exactly what the person's really like.
Yeah.
And so that's useful sometimes, but the Lord permits that, no, you don't always have to see that.
No, God's not interested in anything but letting people live as happily as they can in their condition.
That's right.
It's interesting that you shed the form of good the human form if you're not good. Because here we say that's inhuman if you act a certain way, but human beings are the evilest thing you could ever find. I mean, like the kind of crimes people commit, you never find, like a tiger is never going to go to the same lengths. Why do we hold up like you're not acting like a human,
pursuing the same vendetta for 30 years or something?
Exactly. I think it's because, or just killing needlessly or torturing, all kinds of stuff. Right. It's because I think we sense that the human form that we're in, the eyes, the face, just like what a person is, there should be goodness that comes with that.
Yeah.
And that Swedenborg says that spiritually, here we retain our physical human form no matter what, but spiritually, if you lose that essential love and goodness, you reject the human form along with him.
People say someone's a monster. Like you hear that in the Holocaust sometimes, that someone was a monster or they were not human, or or more jokingly, like in football or something, they say someone's a beast and that kind of thing. But
there it really is. So Swedenborg goes on to say that the reason for this, the negative appearance, is that good that has been joined to truth by the Lord shapes the angelic heaven into a likeness of a human being. So if you reject that heaven, you reject
the human along with it. Right?
Yep. On this account, all who are there are images of it according to the nature of their own good. The inwardly evil put off the human form in hell and look like monsters according to the nature of their evil. Ooh. And you think about about horror movies or scary movies.
Yeah.
How the bad guys are all like messed up human forms, like the scary it's just like
zombies, all that stuff.
It's right. It's like zombies a good example. This should be a human, but they're dead and they have rotting whatever.
Right.
It's this sort of change on the human form.
Yeah. Right.
You see Stranger Things, it's a sort of humanoid beast, but it doesn't have a face. It's like just a mouth. That's the scary thing. Like those. Spoiler alert. Those sort of. It's been a while, right, since the first season came out.
I think you're okay.
Those things are variations. It's it's how far you go from the human form.
Yeah. Wow. So this is saying that how we manage the good and truth thing while we're here actually affects how spiritually good looking we are in the other world.
So if for no other reason, like you want to look good,
beauty tips.
Be
you
good.
Heard it here first.
Be good. Goodness equals goodness in that world, and you'll really be consistently something. And like we said, inner and outer self, we're all going to have this outer self that's annoying and spiritually not that great. Doesn't mean we can't be cultivating this inner self that does reach for that.
The Lord is working on us inside there. That's right.
That's a bunch of confusing stuff, though, still. And hopefully we've put out enough strange, confusing material in these last two sections that you all have questions or things you want to discuss more. We're going to go into our live Q&A. If you haven't gotten questions or comments in about it, get them in now. We're going to take 3 of your questions, answer them to the best of our ability in our next section. All right. This is the chat Q&A. Get questions in as we say it, and we'll try to answer them as well. We'll see how many. I said we'll see how many we can get in our allotted time.
That's right.
All right. Let's take a look at our first question.
Always exciting.
Nexus of Existence asks, do Swedenborgians have any preference for which version of the English Bible they read?
Yeah.
Are you a Swedenborgian? Yeah,
I've known one.
Yeah. So what is it? Does it matter? Because Swedenborg, what Bible did Swedenborg read? Does it matter?
Swedenborg had actually like 11 different Bibles, and he was interested in different translations. Yeah. There were some that he liked a lot, if he was particularly looking for the meaning of the Hebrew in the Old Testament or things like that. Okay. There are different. There's different groups within Swedenborgianism, and they seem to like different ones. Some go for the New King James Version, some go for the NIV. I use about 3 different kinds of, and I look at the Old King James, which nothing's called the Old King James, but I call it that because there's
it's
the New King James.
Yeah.
But there's King James version.
What should we call our new translation? We'll call it the Old King James.
That's right. I mean, he was pretty old, right?
Yeah.
The King James Version, the New King James Version, but also the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version. Yeah. I think is really, really good, like a good understanding of Greek and the underlying languages, and really got it into into English. So I admire the translation that's done in there. So if I really want to understand something, the NRSV is one that I use. But I know people like the NIV and other things.
It brings up an interesting question because Swedenborg was so specific about the language in the Bible, meaning that every little word has specific inner meaning. And does certain translations not have the right words? But at the same time, it seems like he was real casual in the way that he quoted the Bible. He would paraphrase a ton.
Very much.
It's almost like there's like an underlying structure that matters, but the actual words don't as much. Or
I forget this exact reference, but there's some place where he's quoting. He just gives you a block quote, and then you look at the reference. It's Psalm 119 verses 7 and 168 or something like that. Like he just pulled, they're 7 pages apart in your Bible, but he pulled them together and created one quote out of it.
It's not because he thinks, it's unimportant. To him, the text in the Old and New Testaments was just phenomenally important, right? But yet it was somehow a living, flexible thing, enough that it wasn't about, it's King James or nothing.
It's not about the outside of it being perfect. In fact, he even says shockingly that if the Bible had come to different people, it would have been written differently on the outside, but it would have had exactly the same content on the inside. Yeah. You know what I mean? So how important is the outside in one way if you could change it and it would still have the same meaning inside? You're absolutely right. It is a curious thing that every single stroke of every letter, all the little things have meaning, he says, and the angels know what all that stuff means. And yet when he's quoting scripture often, he's pretty paraphrasy. Yeah. And I notice when Jesus quotes the Old Testament in the New Testament, and it wasn't called the Old Testament then either, Hebrew scriptures, he does the same thing. He'll pull different things together, or he'll have 2 lines that are a quote, and then the other 2 lines aren't a quote. He just added them or whatever. So, so you got some license there.
To add just a layer, and then we'll move on. Swedenborg says the word exists in heaven, but it exists in the heavenly form. It doesn't have the same names of people and
stuff. It doesn't
have
any names or any sort of time and space stuff in it.
It seems like you can do all right with anything, but it all means something. That's the end. All right, thanks. Let's get to our next one. Shelley asks, I hear my mom's voice talking to me in my head. Is it her or my imagination? And this, we want to know, how much does the spiritual world interact? And Swedenborg certainly says that there's a spiritual world all over. Anybody who's passed away is there, and they retain the things that made them, even though we're talking about the appearance changing, the essential underlying thing is you. So how do you know?
That's a tough one. Well, like an interesting point that occurs to me is that even in this world, like people you're very close to, you will get their sort of voice in your head kind of thing. You know what I mean? You'll hear things that they're saying, and yet I know sometimes it hasn't been them. Like what's in my head is not the real them, you know what I mean? And so I wonder whether this is necessarily, it's hard to tell. It could be either, I think.
That's what I'm right? Like, we can't diagnose that. Like, we don't know. And I think Swedenborg does talk about, the spiritual world being able to come through in thought, and that...
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not that that Swedenborg said no, nothing like that could ever happen. It certainly could, but as to whether it is, and I'd be interested because, is this influence that you're getting? Is it seem like her is personality wise? Like is she being supportive and friendly, or is it fit Because you'll certainly get people. Swedenborg will endlessly talk about how deceptive the negative side can be, but then so it depends on.
And generally, and this I'm going out on a bit of a limb here, but not that we haven't been out on a limb before.
This whole show is
but
a limb.
I tend to think from what Swedenborg says that if it's coming in verbal language, it's more on your side of the fence than the other side of the fence. Yeah. Swedenborg says in some places, at least, that. Spirits will influence our feelings more. Yeah. You know what I mean? They'd be more in your mood or in a certain feeling and that kind of thing, rather than these particular words in a row, like this sentence coming out,
And so it
doesn't mean that it couldn't happen.
Yeah, but let's just have you make a point on one side, I'll make a point on the other sid. Good. Because we don't know which one it actually is.
No, that's right.
So
we'll approach the truth.
He talks about dreams.
Flanking maneuver.
That in dreams, angels would talk, and the things they were saying would fall into his mind in concepts that he understood, to represent those things. So it could well be that, mom is there, but she's saying some things that are hitting you at an emotional level, and then it's coming out in thoughts in a voice that it's not like she's saying those words one to one,
right?
But she's providing some kind of influence.
Right. Because some of what I think he's saying there in those dreams is that he would see images, like what they're saying turns into an image in his head,
right?
Instead of just like he just hears exactly.
Okay,
those
so maybe
words
maybe the verbal thing.
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously Swedenborg heard all kinds of angels talking and all kinds of things. That's a lot of what he writes about. So it certainly is possible.
Yeah. Well, this is the limits of our powers.
I think that's a tricky one.
We're not like, there's a lot of people who will say like, okay, I can see the spiritual world. I can tell who it is that's talking right now. That's not what, I don't have that power. So
we've had some good shows about how to tell, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. That's right. We had a show.
Can you think of the names of any?
How to tell the difference between good and evil spirits was a show a long time ago.
Yeah.
How angels talk with us is another one.
That's another good one.
And how angels affect our thoughts is another one. Take a look at that, and then and you'll get it intuitively.
There's some kind of rulers, benchmarks, or something that you can use to try to tell where that's coming from, whether it's useful or not. Another principle I go by is that I always filter everything through my rational mind at some point. Some people are sort of against that, but I think we'll come back from it, look at it rationally, say, is this good? You know what I mean? Like, I think we're supposed to use that freedom and rationality. So that's
everything that we know. Shelley, thanks so much for the question. Hopefully that just gives you some extra things to ponder over. And then when we all get to the next world, you can ask her. Say, was that you?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, let's do our last question. Mr. Binker's the cat says, I wonder what winter corresponds to because it is still cold out. And we almost didn't have this show because there's this ice storm going on right now that made the roads quite slippery.
And here we have this bit called the Icebreaker.
I know.
The ice filter
Man.
We could use that outside.
So, but the question is, winter's got to correspond to something, right?
Yes, it does.
So what is it?
Well, I think of winter as corresponding to a state in which we have truth, to tie this back to truth and goodness.
Yeah, that's right.
We know the truth, but we aren't putting it to work in our lives.
Yes.
So the truth takes the form of snow, ice. It's sort of frozen, inert, in a sense.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It can be beautiful and elegant and everything. But when you put the truth to work, then it soaks into the soil and starts to do good things and all that kind of
truth
stuff.
Truth without love.
So winter is truth without love. Well put.
Truth without love.
You've got a gift.
To read my script. And truth without
There's
love.
No script about this.
Being, and you can think about it in terms of like, dare I say, religious stuff that you'll find some organizations or doctrines that will say like, here's what we believe, and you better do it or you're dead. And there's all these ideas, but no love behind it. That's a winter sort of state.
That's right. Swedenborg even describes some hilarious situation in one of his memorable occurrences, these narratives he tells of spiritual experiences, where he goes to this church in the spiritual world. It's just like buried in snow. They're digging all the snow out of there. And then he actually tells you what the sermon is about, and you can see kind of where all that spiritual snow is coming from, because it is all about how everything's just a mystery and you can't know anything and there's nothing you have to do about it. It's just such a great mystery. So you're sort of paralyzed by not knowing what to do. And then people come up afterward and tell the preacher, "Oh, that was so wise. It was so amazing." And Swedenborg said, "Did you understand anything?"
You don't need to.
No, it's not necessary.
So it can correspond to a lot of different things, but it
doesn't mean we're all being evil because it's an extra cold winter. That's a separate cause and effect thing.
That's right. For that, see our show how spirits are connected to your health, because we try to lay out this idea
That's right.
You're going to be a correspondence, but just because there are spirits that correspond to a disease doesn't mean if you have that disease you're in line with that spirit.
The same thing with a really bad winter. It's just it's a cause and effect.
Come on, trust us.
But it corresponds to, that's
right.
what it corresponds to, I think.
Hey, so this was fun getting to interact with all of you that are here in the audience. It's so fun. I think we'd like to do it and take it to the next level. We actually want to hear from you, because we've been telling our story and how we like Swedenborg and everything like that. We want to hear your story. We want to know, how did you get into the Swedenborg thing? What good is it doing for you? That sort of thing. So we're actually going to do a section now that we call, what do we call it? Getting to know you? Let's see if that's what we call it.
Yeah.
Well, guest story is getting to know you in Welsh. So
yes.
This is the guest story is the time when we get to hear from you. And I don't need to give it much of a lead in, because we give it you'll see us giving it a lead in here. Listen, we got to sit down with a viewer of the show, Linda May from Oslo, Norway, and here's her story. This is a time for you to all see how somebody came into being interested in Swedenborg and the effect that it's having. So here, it was a lot of fun talking to Linda. Here she is. I'd love to start, if you're willing. I just want to hear a little bit about, whenever somebody ends up watching our program, I want to know, how did you find us in the first place? How did you get to here? So what led you to come across our material and Swedenborg?
Well, I was watching a television program, one of those where they sort of find people's roots. And it was Maggie Gyllenhaal, who was the person they were finding the roots about. And her father was a Swedenborgian, and the way they were discussing it, it sounded like this really odd sect, and it came from Sweden. And I live in Norway, which is neighboring to Sweden. And I thought, I've never heard of any weird sect from Sweden that immigrated to the US. So let me look this up. So I was actually coming to it from that perspective, that I'm just curious about what this strange, odd sect was. And then I found Swedenborg, and I'm like, this is not a strange sect. This is somebody who's very spiritual, who is a prophet, basically, if we can use biblical terms. And then I just started Googling him. I found the Swedenborg Foundation. I found Off the Left Eye, and I just sort of, came from it from there. So I was not particularly looking for anything, but I was at the same time looking for Swedenborg and his teachings without even knowing it. Sometimes you don't know what you're looking for before you find it.
That's right. And so what do you have any examples of what kind of things about what Swedenborg was saying made you feel like, I found something here?
Well, I have a more of an evangelical church background, and I haven't been very active in the church for a few years because of, I've been moving around a lot because of my job, and also illness, and several things have sort of taken me actively out of a church setting. So I've been trying to just sort of keep up to some sort of spiritual nourishment online. Luckily, we can have a community with people online. And then when I was looking into Swedenborg, what really popped out at me, there were several things. One of which was his message of love, and that God is love. And also one of the things that sort of rubbed me the wrong way with my church background was this concept that if you do the right thing, meaning if you find the right faith, you're good to go, you're saved. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, you lost that lottery. No matter how good of a person you are, no matter how much you're trying to be dedicated in whatever your life, opens up to you. But if you're not a Christian, too bad. That's just it. You're screwed. And that never sat quite right with me. It's like this, a loving God who is that strict on sort of just this lottery of life. I just never got that. It never sat right with me. So that's really what caught my first interest was, okay, here was somebody saying that God is bigger than this. God is love, and he has a broader view. And for the first time, I felt somebody, without saying in the same words, but was saying that we create God in our image a lot of times for the church. We put him in this little box that we understand. And God is greater than that. And then, of course, I just love this idea of Swedenborg traveling to the spiritual world and all that's very fascinating, everything that he writes about. And this idea of correspondence, that's something that's sort of how I have come to think spiritually throughout my whole life, is that I see something and all of a sudden it becomes a symbol or metaphor, and it means something else to me. It's as if God speaks to me through symbol situations. And so this whole idea of correspondence opened a whole new way of looking at life and spirituality, that it wasn't just me that was sort of a little bit an oddball there, that flower could mean something more than a flower as it does in poetry, and sort of seeing that this is a system that is from the spiritual world to the material world. So there's many things actually.
Yeah, so it kind of hit you in all these different key areas. And that's wonderful. I love the idea of, that correspondence is as poetry. Just like the poets are getting this insight into, there's something more to these experiences we have, and that you were feeling that. And then Swedenborg kind of gives you the framework to put that in. Yeah. And sorry to cut you off, but I was just going to say, the whole, God doesn't make any sense being so limited and so focused on something as external as church. I mean, Swedenborg spent a ton of time railing against that. So you guys kind of kindred spirits there.
Yeah, definitely. Now, so there were like several aspects, because the more I was looking into his teachings, and I have to just thank you guys, because he's not the easiest person to read. So he's not the most accessible. So your programs and your way of, sharing the teachings, which makes it more accessible, has really, really helped, because that also then gives me inspiration to go into his texts and look a little bit closer, because I have some sort of thing to hang it on, to understand what is he actually saying here, because he has a lot of words. He's a very wordy writer.
Yes, right. Good. So we were kind of a good companion piece to the Swedenborg study.
Very, very much so. And also finding sort of a community of other people, with your chats, but also reading the comments on YouTube afterwards have also been very uplifting. And I also, through this, I found some Swedenborgians here in Norway. So, and also another woman who found you guys, who's now connected to the Norwegian congregation, which is very small. I've only met one of the representatives, because they're sort of centered on one family and a few extra people. But now we're a few more that are coming from the outside, basically through you, and finding people locally, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great. Good. And are they close enough that you can visit them? Yeah.
We've met, and we have plans to meet more. And they don't have any services here more than a few times a year, because there's too few people. So apparently there's a minister coming from Stockholm over to Oslo a few times a year. So I haven't hit that quite yet to be able to be there. But also another thing is my sister. She reached out to me, I think it's about 6 months ago, and she said, I found this teaching, and I feel it's very spiritual and it's very spot on. And I said, oh, what's that? And she said, it's Swedenborg. And I just laughed. And I'm like, welcome to the club. So she found it without me telling her about it.
That's great.
It's popping up here and there, and I think people catch on when they feel it resonates.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, and it's so wonderful to hear your story of that resonation happening, and because every time I hear that, I get inspired. Like, oh yeah, this is something that people can find, and they can be glad they found it. So it makes me want to have us keep trying to do that. So, Jonathan, do you want to ask any questions?
Sure. Just a couple of thoughts. Is just as you say, there's just so many words, so long books and so on, and I love the fact that you moved right to the love, like you were able to see the love at the center of it. And frankly, I think there's some people who sort of get lost in the forest or something and don't realize that love is at the center of it all, because it seems like so many concepts and thoughts and things like that. But when you get the love in the center, all of it starts to make sense. It starts to fit together, and you start to see the simplicity in it. And the other thing I loved in what you said, I loved everything you said, just the vastness of God, being bigger. I can see a kind of mercy that we are allowed to have our small idea of God, because maybe it's better than no idea or something. I don't know. Yeah. But I find myself constantly being sort of expanded into realizing, and it's so overwhelming when you take it in, when you realize that mercy and God working individually with every single person, all on their path, like you mentioned, going through sickness or traveling, like that's all like God knows what that's doing and uses that in some way, and everybody's on their own journey, and it can be kind of overwhelming to try to take that all in. And part of what I love what he said is that, but there's just an essential humanity there. Which to me translates also as a sense of humor. There's love, there's wisdom, there's perspective, and so on, and we can really connect with that in a kind of one-on-one and intimate way, even though there's this vastness there. So, anyway, that's what you inspired me to think.
No, thank you, and the clarity of just sort of those several. Sometimes when you have phrases, it sort of cooks things down to like its core, and you can expand from there. So it's like, okay, we're talking about love of God and love of the neighbor, and versus love of self and love of the world. And that's it's so simple and it's so clear. It's either the one or the other. And it's like you have a compass that's so clear. Okay, so what is love? Which of these two main categories, do I fall into in general in my life, or this situation, or my meeting with somebody, or my meeting with the situation? Is it the love of self and love of the world that's sort of driving me? Or is it genuine love of the neighbor and love of God that's driving me? And that is, it's such a, it's such a clear compass that because I've read through the Bible several times, and this whole idea of love, which is so simple, but yet so vast. But when you get it down into those core principles, it does help, because it's very easy to tell. I mean, I know right off, this is love of self. I mean, right. I can hide that. I can pretend the rest of the world is something else, but I know that this is what's driving force in this situation. And that sort of helps me adjust.
That's wonderful.
So that's what one of the things I really like about the clarity that Swedenborg brings. What I find to be very biblical, very, very biblical.
That's right, absolutely. Well, and it's so awesome for us to hear about, you taking it, putting it into those usable tools, applying that to life. That's so cool. I'm excited about the idea of the community growing out there in Norway, and hopefully we get to interact with you more and more as it does. We're out of time, but I could easily talk for another 25, 30 minutes with you here. So we just appreciate.
Great talking to you, and you guys do of course, you're the faces we see, and then there are a few other faces we see, and I know there's a whole team behind you, and I just want to express my gratitude and appreciation of all the wonderful work that you do, because it means, I think, a lot more to a lot more people than you ever will know, at least in this lifetime, maybe in the next, to know a little bit more about it. But thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've meant a lot to me personally, and I know you do to a lot of people. So.
Well, thank you, and thank you for letting us know. And it's so nice to, I love your clarity. You just have tremendous clarity, I think, about the message, and just the way you put it there was fantastic. So it's enriching to talk with you.
Absolutely.
Blessing.
Yeah, we're so glad you're enjoying it, and it's inspiring for us to get to have this chat with you, and hopefully we do it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, take care.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Linda. Thanks for hanging out. Hopefully you're watching right now. If not, we'll catch you another time. We said we were going to sort of finish off our 3-course audience participation meal here with getting to hear some of your answers to our original icebreaker question. We're going to do that in our very last segment, the ice melter. So, while this show has been going on since we asked our icebreaker, sorry, I just was spontaneously rocking out to that music. While we've been doing this whole show, after we asked that question behind the scenes, Chelsea has been furiously compiling the responses and things that we've got. And what we're going to share with you now here based on that is not comprehensive. It's just a sampling of the responses we got. So if yours didn't make it on, very sorry. But hopefully from what everyone sees, you can get a sense of just the way Swedenborg is affecting people. So here's what you all had to say about what's an idea in Swedenborg's works that has had a positive impact on your life. So this is what you said. First of all, heaven. People talked about how there's this, under the broad category of heaven, the idea that there's a sense of eternity, making suffering easier to endure. That was Yokopo. There are communities in heaven, Prela Minimal, Pete Dawson, Kay Lerman all talked about those mattering. What I love determines who I'll be with in heaven. Katie Barnes was saying that humans are angels, learning is eternal. Sharon Spruill thought that was powerful. We will have a mate after we die, even if we haven't had true love in this world, Denise. Like that. That's awesome. Let's see. What's our next broad category is the church. That Will Linden said the idea that everyone is in the universal church.
That's right.
That's mattered. And Tracy Canada said that the church is within. And then next category of response, the meaning in the Bible. Katrina Marshall said that it was meaningful to her that there's more to the Bible than meets the eye. Twisted Angel 966, his interpretation allowed me to give Christianity a second chance to connect to a loving God. I had lost hope. So that's cool. That was a bridge.
That's great.
John May, correspondence has changed the way I perceive the world and Scripture. And then our final category of response, spirit influence. Okay, so far, me too, says being able to tell the difference between good and evil spirits. I recognize when I'm being influenced and manage to release myself.
Nice.
And then Samuel Rhodes says knowing influence from heaven and hell makes me pay attention to my thoughts and intentions. So
wow, those were all so good.
That makes me feel good. That makes me feel like
really, really good. A nice range in there and everything.
That's right.
And I know that wasn't even all the responses. That's really awesome.
So Swedenborg has given people things that are making a difference in their life, and that's why we spend this time doing a show called Swedenborgian Life, and now that show is over. Thanks for watching the inaugural episode of Swedenborgian Life live with us. If you enjoyed yourself here, please like and subscribe. That makes it so that we can go out into the YouTubes of the world and make a difference there. Also, consider joining us on Patreon. That's our way that you can support us with a little $1 donation per episode, and when you do, we'll give you behind-the-scenes content. This week we had a more in-depth look at the studio that we're going to be building, the new one that we're going to be shooting our new shows out of. Anyway, you get sort of behind-the-scenes, first exclusive, limited access stuff there. Just our little way to say thanks for making this possible for everyone, so check that out, and we're going to be back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, same time, with another live show. Next week, we're going to be looking for our keywords at the will and the understanding.
Oh, good one.
The two essential parts of us that make us human and the way we receive this good and truth we've all been talking about. We'll be taking another road trip based on that. It's going to be a really fun show. Thank you, Jonathan, for hanging out.
Oh, it's good fun. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone at home, for hanging out. Thanks to the rest of the Swedenborgian Life team. And we will be back in 1 week.
Swedenborgian Life is Amy Aquarola, Morgan Beard, Curtis Childs, Karen Childs, Matthew Childs, Alexa Cole, John Connolly, Cara Dom, Chris Dunn, Stuart Farmer, Ben Keys, Reed McCardle, Chelsea Odner, Jonathan Rose, Shiloh Silverman, and Shada Sullivan.